I have to work now. Walk to the hospital from here. In the midst of an approaching typhoon. My husband suddenly told this while on the way to the hospital, as I began to feel contractions. I desperately tried to resist as he attempted to force me out of the car, but he managed to drag me out. The intense rain battered my body, and the strong wind made it difficult even to stand. But that's impossible. My screams were drowned out by the rain and wind. I watched in shock as the taillights of our car sped away. Without a phone and no passing cars in the typhoon, I felt helpless. Another surge of pain threatened to bring me down, but I made a decision. The only one who can save this baby is me. I have to stay strong. And so I walked through the storm for 3 hours to reach the hospital and successfully gave birth to our child. Holding my baby girl, a surge of anger towards my husband swelled inside my mind. My name is Jessica. I'm a 29-year-old married woman. Originally, I worked as a teacher in the city. 3 years ago, I met Michael through a friend's introduction. After a year of dating, we got married. I then moved to his remote hometown, where there isn't even a convenience store. Michael worked as an executive in a construction company owned by his father, ensuring a comfortable income. So, I became a full-time housewife. We built a home and started our life together, maintaining a good relationship with my in-laws, who lived nearby. They often told me, "We're so grateful you came to this rural place to be with our son." They treated me exceptionally well. I adapted to the local customs and community quite easily. Although Michael never helped with household chores, it was okay for me because I've known that he was working hard. Time passed, and on our first wedding anniversary, I discovered I was pregnant. After confirming the pregnancy at a major hospital an hour's drive away, I immediately informed Michael. He simply said, "I see," and seemed unenthusiastic. However, my in-laws were thrilled and looked after me. My pregnancy was far from easy. I suffered from severe morning sickness, feeling as though I was perpetually seasick, unable to even sit up. On that particular day, I was bedridden. Michael came home and confronted me. "Where's my dinner?" I felt too sick to cook. "Can you eat the frozen food I bought?" "Really? You've been home all day, and you're slacking off. I'm pregnant with your child, and I'm struggling with morning sickness." I tried to make him understand, but Michael wasn't having any of it. With a stern face, he retorted, "Pregnancy isn't an illness. Don't use it as an excuse to slack off. Cook something now." Before I tried to reply, nausea overcame me, and I rushed to the bathroom. He continued to berate me even as I left. Don't think he'll gain my sympathy with this act. I'm not acting. I genuinely feel awful. I responded from the bathroom floor, curling into myself. Michael let out an exaggerated sigh. "Just do what you have to do. If I come home next time and there's no food, you're in trouble." In the end, despite my nausea, I had no choice but to prepare his meal that day. Michael continued to demand the same level of household perfection as before my pregnancy, showing no understanding or concern for my condition. If things didn't work well as he expected, he'd make me sit down on the floor and teach me for a long time. Perhaps it was because of such a life that, at 6 months pregnant, I was diagnosed with a threatened preterm birth and was strictly advised bed rest by the doctor. I informed Michael, but he showed no sympathy. One day, I was severely reprimanded because I hadn't folded the laundry before he got home. "You're slacking off again. I told you not to be lazy, but the doctor told me to rest. Otherwise, it might affect the baby." "Who cares? Who do you think is providing for you?" I don't need a wife who can't even do household chores properly. If I leave, you're the one who'll suffer." Shocked by his words, the thought of divorce crossed my mind in a moment. However, the faces of our parents and in-laws, who were happy about our marriage and my pregnancy, soon came to mind. Above all, being close to my due date and unable to move, I had no one to turn to and had to endure it all alone. Time flew, and I was now in my 9th month. It was typhoon season, and the weather forecast warned of a typhoon hitting our area in a few days. Although there's a superstition that babies are more likely to be born during typhoons. With still 2 weeks left until my due date, I was optimistic. As the typhoon approached, heavy rain began, and the wind grew fierce. Michael and I were home when suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. At first, I endured it, but the pain came every 20 minutes and grew stronger each time. "This is definitely labor." Convinced, I immediately asked Michael to drive me to the hospital, but he replied, looking annoyed, "In this heavy rain and wind, just take a taxi." Despite my intense discomfort, I tried calling a taxi, but due to the bad weather, none were available. "It takes an hour to the hospital by car. Please drive me." After persistent pleading with tears in my eyes, Michael reluctantly got into the car, and I somehow settled into the passenger seat. The typhoon was now in full swing, making visibility near zero. Watching the windshield wipers frantically work, I held onto my painful belly as we navigated the mountain road. Suddenly, Michael received a call. "Okay, got it. I'll be right there." After hanging up with a blank expression, he announced, "I have to work now. Walk to the hospital from here." Stunned, I snapped at Michael. "I'm about to give birth, and in this weather, walking is impossible." But Michael stopped the car, came around to the passenger side, and forcibly pulled me out. The heavy rain and wind assaulted me. Desperate to find help, I realized I'd dropped my phone in the car. And not even a single vehicle passed in the storm. Another wave of pain hit, but I was determined. The only one who can save this baby is me. I have to be strong. Drenched and battered by the storm, I continued walking towards the hospital. Every time a contraction hit, I'd stop and moan in pain, then continue walking. It took me 3 hours to reach the hospital in this manner. By the time I finally arrived, completely drenched and exhausted, the hospital staff was in utter shock. After explaining the situation, I was immediately examined. I was already in advanced labor. Within an hour of arriving, I gave birth. The first time I held my little daughter in my arms, I was overwhelmed with joy. However, there was another emotion growing inside me, just as intense. To leave his wife in labor, alone in the middle of a typhoon. I can't consider such a person my husband anymore. I will never forgive him. It was the moment my patience reached the limit. When I awoke from a brief sleep due to the exhaustion of childbirth, I found the room filled with my in-laws and relatives. Jessica, you're awake?" Robert peered into my face with concern, and his wife Emily. My mother-in-law seemed slightly panicked. "We heard from the hospital staff. You had a tough time yesterday. You walked in that typhoon, and it could have been very dangerous. What happened? Where is Michael?" Holding back tears, I finally spoke. "Robert, Emily, and all my relatives, I have something important to share." Then I revealed everything Michael had done throughout my pregnancy. The faces of Robert, Emily, and the relatives changed color. "That damn boy. How could he?" "We've got the story, Jessica. Please rest your body now. Leave the rest to us." The relatives, looking furious, began to leave the hospital room. Although I wanted to confront Michael myself, I couldn't even sit up properly in my bed. Predictably, I knew they would take matters into their own hands after hearing everything. I also took aside one of the relatives, Brian, who was also a colleague of Michael's, and made a request. After that, I had a peaceful hospital stay. I cherished my time with my beloved baby, and by the time of my discharge, I had finally become accustomed to breastfeeding and diaper changing. When I returned home with the baby in a taxi, I noticed several cars outside our house, and strangely, our brick fence was destroyed. When I entered the house, I was confronted with a shocking scene. In the middle of the living room, Mikey was lying down almost in tears with bandages around his head and casts on his arms and legs. Robert, Emily, and many relatives were surrounding him, glaring. What happened here? Upon hearing my voice, Michael yelled out, "Jessica, you're back! Help me! Why are you injured?" Instead of answering, Michael averted his gaze. Robert, standing next to him, sighed and spoke on Michael's behalf. "After leaving you that day, he went drinking somewhere. He drank until morning and, believe it or not, drove drunk and caused an accident. What drink driving? After visiting you, we came here to confront Michael and found him crashed into our own brick fence. We were so shocked. After the emergency services were called, the police came, and it was quite a commotion. Everyone, including me, stared sharply at Michael, but he avoided our gaze and made a feeble attempt. Forget about that. Let's focus on the baby now. Let's change the mood and celebrate her birth." As he tried to crawl closer with a forced smile, I quickly stepped back to save the baby. "Stay away." "Wow. Why, Jessica, you left me like a labor during a typhoon, and on top of that, you drove drunk. You have no right to be called a father. I won't let you touch this child." Michael's face turned bright red and he started to tremble. "How dare you talk back to me like that, even though you are my wife?" However, I dropped a bombshell on Michael. "By the way, you weren't really working that day, were you?" What are you talking about? You've been visiting the home of a woman who works at a nearby bar, haven't you? There are eyewitness accounts and evidence, you know." I had informed Michael's colleague and our relative, Brian, about my suspicions of Michael having an affair and asked him to investigate if there were any clues. Given the close-knit nature of our rural community, rumors were already circulating that Michael was infatuated with a woman from a local bar. I had also obtained photo evidence of him visiting a home from Brian. The room fell silent, and everyone's cold gazes were caught by Michael. "Well, what kind of joke is this? The only one joking here is you?" Robert shouted at Michael, who was trying to defend himself, and Michael's eyes darted around in panic. Robert continued with a voice laden with anger. "Just like Jessica said, you're not appropriate to be a father. From what's happened, it's clear you're not even fit to be a decent human being. Dad, Michael, you're fired from our company effective today." "What fired? You mean I'm getting the boot?" Michael turned pale and began to panic. Robert firmly stated, driving under the influence was already a deal breaker for the company. "No complaints, right? Don't do this to me." Michael had been comfortably living off his position in Robert's company. Losing his income was something he couldn't afford. "Hey, Mom, please calm Dad down." Seeing the unwavering determination in his father's eyes, he turned to his mother to plead, but she pushed him away and declared with a large voice, "What you did to Jessica was despicable, Michael. And considering that you even had an affair, I can't regard you as my son anymore. We're disowning you." Disowning? Robert, Emily, and the relatives all nodded in agreement. Seeing that he was alone, Michael turned to me with a shocked expression. "Dad, Mom, please rethink. I have to support them. If you fire and disown me, our dear grandchild will suffer too." "Right, Jessica. That would be a problem, wouldn't it?" I glared at Michael and shouted with all my might. "I don't need you to support us. We're getting a divorce." What? "I never want to see your face again." "We're leaving." "Wait a minute. I'm demanding $30,000 for property division and child support. So make sure you pay it in full." Stunned, Michael stood frozen. Robert gently spoke up. "We respect Jessica's decision and will support her. We'll make sure he pays what he owes. Don't worry." Gratefully, I bowed to Robert. Seeing this, Michael finally broke down. "Please, Jessica, don't abandon me." As Michael tried to grab onto me, crying and sniffling, the relatives restrained him. Once again, I bowed to Robert, Emily, and the relatives, and then gathered my belongings to leave the house that very day. Afterwards, my divorce from Michael was completed. The property division was promptly transferred to me. I sold the house and was able to get half of the child support from the proceeds. We agreed that he would pay an additional $700 every month. I also demanded $20,000 in compensation from his mistress and successfully secured it. Rumors in the close-knit rural community made her feel uncomfortable, and it said she eventually moved far away. Michael was indeed fired from Robert's company. Robert, along with his wife and the entire family, cut ties with Michael. Once Michael recovered from his injuries, Robert had him work on a tuna fishing vessel loaned by a friend, declaring that Michael wouldn't be allowed off until he finished paying all the child support. Once Michael recovered from his injuries, Robert had him work on a tuna fishing vessel loaned by a friend, declaring that Michael wouldn't be allowed off until he finished paying all the child support. Meanwhile, I returned to my parents' home and have been focusing on raising my child with their assistance. I am planning to return to my teaching job soon. Robert and Emily regularly visit my daughter. She's thriving and is dearly loved by both sets of grandparents. Moving forward, I aim to prioritize my daughter's happiness and lead a bright and fulfilling life.
Catherine, have the inheritance procedures been completed?
Is that so? Has the money already been transferred?
Although John rarely visited when my husband was well, now he and his family have come. Ostentatiously, they brought their son Robert in front of me and inquired about my husband's inheritance. It was clear they were just after the money. Without any pretense, they suggested that the inheritance should be used for their grandchild. Grandparents might find their grandchildren adorable unconditionally, but to me, John and his family seemed to be just using their child to extort money. No, the procedure is complicated, and it hasn't been completed yet. On the spur of the moment, I lied. Emily smirked and offered help. John, irritated by my attitude, raised his voice. Robert, however, didn't even greet me. He was running around the living room and opening the fridge on his own to find snacks and drinks. Even though he was my grandson, I couldn't find him endearing at all. Watching this behavior and seeing the couple who were only urging for money and not reprimanding their child, I was dumbfounded. Additionally, the next day, Emily's parents came over and started lecturing me on how a family should behave. To me, they were nothing more than strangers now, but it seemed they had been blinded by the $200 million and kept making selfish arguments in front of me. I was at the end of my patience. There was a loud crash from behind. Taking that as a cue, I decided to give them a taste of their own medicine. My name is Catherine. I am 66 years old this year. While I was an ordinary housewife with 2 children, my husband was a businessman who had amassed a significant fortune. As a result, after my husband's funeral, there was a fuss regarding the inheritance. They say money changes people, but I never expected my own son to act this way. I never anticipated that it would lead to such a major commotion involving even strangers. After the funeral, I called a lawyer and discussed the inheritance with my children. Ultimately, almost all of my husband's assets were transferred to me. Thanks to the will my husband had prepared, which read, "To my wife, who I put through so much," the lawyer was able to proceed smoothly. The 6 years accompanying my capricious husband, who detested facilities and loved tobacco, alcohol, and horse racing, were certainly not easy. My children had already left home at that time, so I tried my best not to bother them. Since my husband left a note stating that the inheritance should compensate for the hardships I faced, I gratefully accepted. The inheritance amounted to about $300 million. My eldest daughter, Karen, from the start, believed that I, as his wife, should receive everything. She was satisfied with the lawyer's explanation and her legal share. The problem was with my eldest son, John. "It's not fair for my sister, who's single, and me, who has a family, to receive the same amount." "Your wife doesn't have a right to the inheritance, so it's only natural." "Even so, 200 million for Mom? That's way too much. Does she even care about her own children?" John started accusing me, his mother, of being greedy, and tried to increase his share. Even though the will was with the lawyer, he claimed I fabricated it. He also confronted the lawyer, saying it's strange not to distribute it equally among the biological children. He even went so far as to threaten to sue me and was reprimanded by the lawyer who was present at the time. If he was going to assert his rights so strongly, I can't help but think he should have at least shown his face occasionally. In fact, Karen used to visit from time to time, but John, citing work and child rearing, hardly ever showed his face to my husband or me. Without even helping with caregiving, I sighed at John, who now seemed blinded by the amount of the inheritance. "Mom, don't worry about John, okay?" "Thank you, but I wonder if John is really that strapped for cash." "Who knows? He seems to be going on family trips quite often, so maybe he just wants money to have fun." At Karen's words, I had a bad feeling. And that feeling came true, leading me to more futile disputes with John and his group. Sometime after the inheritance discussions, around the time when the inheritance procedures, which I had been consulting with a lawyer about, were completed, John and his wife, Emily, came to our house. While having a bad feeling, I led the two into the house, and they immediately started discussing the inheritance without much greeting. "Catherine, had the inheritance procedures been completed yet?"
"Yes. Has the money been transferred yet?"
"No. The procedures are complicated and it's not done yet." "Would you like us to help? After all, managing such a large amount of money like 300 million must be a lot of work, right?"
"No, thank you. So what brings you here today?"
"Come on, don't be so cold. We came to show you your grandchild's face after all."
The grandchild, Robert, who they hadn't shown to us even when my husband was alive and who was now in elementary school, was with them. I had babysat Robert a few times when he was a baby, but recently they hadn't even invited me for occasions like his birthdays. Maybe I only got gifts and New Year's money through John. Grandparents might find their grandchildren unconditionally adorable, but to me Robert looked like just another unknown child brought by John and his wife to squeeze money out of me. "Aren't you happy to see your grandson after such a long time, Catherine?" "Well, maybe. Children are going to need more money from now on, you know. It gets expensive." "Yes, you both should work hard."
What's that supposed to mean? Don't you feel like doing something for your cute grandchild?"
John raised his voice, seeming irritated by my attitude. However, Robert didn't even greet me. Instead, he ran around the living room and began rummaging through the refrigerator for snacks and drinks. Neither Emily nor John scolded him. They just emphasized how energetic and cute he was. I couldn't find him cute at all. Robert, aren't you being a bit too mischievous? Parents should teach their children manners and common sense. Oh, we practice non-punitive education. It's okay. I wasn't sure what was okay about it, but it seemed they didn't realize I was scolding them. As Emily followed Robert around while he freely explored the house, I had to intervene. But when I spoke up, Robert responded by saying, "You're annoying," and slapped my leg repeatedly. Seeing their unruly grandchild and his parents, who were only concerned about money, I had reached my limit. Enough is enough. John, the lawyer has explained the inheritance matter to you, hasn't he?
But isn't 200 million a bit too much to receive? Mom, you're surprisingly greedy.
The one who's greedy is you. At your age, I don't have money to give to someone who never took care of me. Words were exchanged in anger, but I made sure to firmly convey my message. I finally kicked John and his family out of my house. If they had been closer to my husband and me on a regular basis, I might have considered leaving them an inheritance for educational funds. However, I felt nothing but anger and disbelief at John and his group's attempts to simply push their self-serving arguments. Even after such a heated exchange, the next day, for some reason, John and his team, including Emily's parents, showed up at our house. Even when I checked their business through the intercom, they just kept clamoring to be let in. Thinking that it would cause a disturbance in the neighborhood, I reluctantly let them in. For some reason, Emily's parents began lecturing me.
We are families with adorable grandchildren. We have to help each other out.
That's right. You've just lost your husband. You must be feeling lonely. The couple seemed to talk a lot about family and helping each other. John and Emily just nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, their lively grandson was still running around the living room. I warned Robert not to run around. Shut up! Not only did Robert shout back, but all four of them turned on me for trying to restrain a child's behavior. One day our son or grandson might help us out. Isn't that what normal families would think? I intend to prepare everything myself so that I don't burden my children.
It's sad talk like that which gets you cut off from seeing your grandchild. Aren't you ashamed to think only of yourself?
Our daughter gave birth to that grandchild. Your husband was Robert's grandfather. He would have wanted to contribute financially. Despite all their talk of helping out, it always came back to money. In the end, these two, perhaps egged on by John and the others, had come all this way just for the inheritance. When I was getting tired of hearing these two, who assumed Emily, my son's wife, would care for them in their old age, and kept talking nonsense about what family is, a loud noise suddenly came from behind. Everyone turned to see the shattered pieces of a vase from the shelf and a surprised Robert. Robert probably knocked the vase over while running around. Seeing the vase, which my late husband loved, shattered into pieces, something inside me snapped.
Wow, that was quite a crash.
Robert, are you okay? Are you hurt?
Why would you place such a dangerous item where a child can reach it?
If our precious grandson gets hurt, we might have to ask for compensation. John laughed it off, while Emily and her parents were frantic. I sighed heavily in frustration.
So, where's the inheritance? The paperwork is done, right?
About that.
What?
The vase that your child just broke was your father's inheritance. For a moment, John's group was silent, exchanging glances. They glanced at the broken pieces, then at my angry face, turning pale. Catherine, you're joking, right? It's no joke. As you said, the paperwork was done long ago. In these times, having money can be dangerous. You never know who might target you, so I quickly converted it into an asset. As I said this with a hint of sarcasm, I could see everyone was puzzled. Holding back laughter, I feigned sadness, looking down and covering my mouth.
No way. This tacky vase can't be worth 200 million. Right, Mom?
Would you like me to bring out the warranty for that vase? Oh, and I'll need to file a damage report too. Wait, are you joking? It was just a child's mistake. You're right. Parents should compensate for their children's actions. How about paying around 200 million? Don't say that. After all, it's important for families to help each other out. Exactly. That's why you're helping me now, right? After all, I'm family too, especially after my husband's inheritance was ruined. The four exchanged glances, their faces clearly shaken and at a loss for words. The first to speak was John, who blurted out that it was Emily's fault for not disciplining the child. This led to Emily objecting and her parents making feeble excuses, saying things like it wasn't their responsibility to discipline their grandson. Enough! How can adults who can't even apologize talk about disciplining children? No one apologized to me. In their nonchalant attitudes, despite causing trouble, I couldn't contain myself and yelled out in anger. Robert, in a soft voice, he said, "I'm sorry." He probably apologized reflexively, because I was so visibly angry. Even seeing this, the four remained silent, looking down. "We'll discuss this another day," someone said in a strained voice, and everyone hurriedly left. It was funny to see Robert, the main cause of all this, looking clueless as he was led away. Because of this, I was thinking of syncing up with Karen. What on earth is John thinking? People really do change when money is involved. After having a good laugh, I briefed Karen on the situation and asked her to cooperate. Occasionally, they'd call as if they had forgotten what they'd done, asking for gifts for the grandson, but whenever I reminded them about the broken vase, saying I was so saddened by the shattered vase, they'd quickly hang up. A few weeks after contacting Karen, she also received a call. As expected, John had come begging to her. "Hey sis, can you lend me some of the inheritance you got?" "No. Are you still talking about that?" "Please, I'm in a bit of a tight spot." Apparently, John told Karen in a terrified manner that he needed to compensate for the 200 million base. As for what happened to the inheritance John received, it seems Emily and her parents spent it all. Karen lectured John about his greediness, but even using his child as an excuse, he tried desperately to get more. When Karen thoroughly explained that even what she received wouldn't be enough, he left, visibly dejected. Hearing this, I laughed again. It seems John and the others are now in a big dispute over who should pay. Every now and then, they would call asking to be forgiven, but as soon as I mentioned discussing through a lawyer, they'd hang up trembling. Thanks to that, I now live peaceful days with no involvement from them. By the way, the lie about the vase that grandson Robert broke being worth 200 million was a complete fabrication. The vase was just a cheap one my late husband bought because he liked it. It was displayed after John and the others left our home, so there's no way they'd know about it. If they showed even a hint of remorse and willingness to compensate, I might have told them the truth. However, after a few calls, there was complete silence. They seem to have blocked my number and I can't get through. The real inheritance is, of course, still in the bank. I had intended to use a little for my old age and leave the rest for the children, but now my mindset has changed. Karen, how about we go on a trip together? On your father's money. Sounds great. Where should we go? How about a nice resort? That sounds lovely. Also, I've been thinking about discussing Dad's money with you properly. After seeing the true colors of John and the others, I decided not to give them any of my husband's precious money. I plan to not only bequeath it to Karen, but also explore better ways to use it as I continue my life.
My name is Emily. I turned 35 this year. On the summer day when the cicadas were loud, I was called into the president's office.
Mom? Oh, I mean both.
What is it? My mother, who is the president, fanned herself with a hand fan while gazing away. I've decided to hand the company over to your sister. You, the ugly one, are fired as of today. The bright summer sunlight from the window made me question for a moment if what I just heard was real. What? My voice came out involuntarily, high-pitched and dumb. You're fired. We don't need ugliness in our company. Leave by the end of this month. And with that, she snapped her fan shut and turned her attention back to her paperwork. Alone in the president's office with only the cicadas singing, I pondered the weight of her words. Just as I was doing so, she scolded. Are you still here? Get back to work. I backed out mechanically and closed the door behind me. Our company is a small two-story building and a demolition company with about 10 employees. It's a family-run business, with my mother as the president, my aunt and her husband as executive directors, and my mother's cousin and her husband as managing directors. However, almost all the real power was held by my mother. Originally, after graduating high school, I worked at a tax accountant's office, but at 25, my mother said they lacked an accountant and forced me to join our family's company. On top of accounting, I was burdened with all kinds of clerical and miscellaneous tasks. Sometimes I was even sent out for sales work. In short, I was the company's jack of all trades. Still, to not be a burden to others, I worked hard from morning till night and managed to handle my job for 10 years. On the other hand, my younger sister, Catherine, only worked for us for 2 years. Catherine had job hopped, always complaining that something just didn't feel right. After turning 30, as job conditions worsened, she just lounged around at home without even job hunting. Then our mother said, "There is a suitable job for you," and made her a managing director at our company. I've been with the company for 10 years and I'm still just a regular employee. People were surprised at the disparity in treatment between me and Catherine, but I thought, it's just the way it is. My mother always favored Catherine ever since we were kids. My beautiful sister was given new clothes, toys, and endless praise. In contrast, I was given hand-me-downs from cousins and neighbors. When I was young, I didn't fully understand why this was happening. All I did was work hard, hoping to gain my mother's attention. No matter how good my grades were, she just briefly glanced at the report card. I even considered getting plastic surgery at one point. Seeing my distress, my aunt told me the reason for my mother's neglect during my high school years. I was told my father passed away, but in reality, he ran away with another woman the year Catherine was born. That woman was older and less attractive than my mother, and she resembled me in some ways. Your mother is high in pride. She couldn't accept that her husband was taken away by an older and less attractive woman, and she sees that woman in you. By the way, my aunt, who is my mother's younger sister, had a face that was neither particularly attractive nor unattractive, and resembled me. Well, I've had my issues with that person too, but she was good at her job. It was mostly seduction, though. My mother took over the family business from my late grandfather at the age of 32, after my father left her. She greatly utilized her beauty to gain more and more clients, improving the company's performance.
I believe the rise in the number of buildings needing demolition after surpassing their durability also played a part in this trend. As a result, neither my aunt's family nor my cousin's family could stand up to my mother. Recently, the cost of industrial waste disposal and transportation has become burdensome, affecting the balance between demolition costs and actual expenses. This is not just an issue in our industry. Our company has also been underperforming for a while. It has become quite a struggle even to pay our employees' salaries every month. During such challenging times, when my younger sister joined the company as an executive, I wondered how we would afford her salary. To my surprise, my mother said, "You'll need to reduce your salary to cover hers. We need to support each other, because we are family. Even if you cut my salary, we can't afford an executive's pay." When I made this valid point, my mother, as always, forcefully responded, "It's your job as a veteran to figure it out. Just do something about it." Timidly, I muttered, "Shouldn't Catherine start as a regular employee?" My mother glared at me, rebuking, "Who do you think you're talking to? And it's not your place to say such things." At that time, we lived in the same house. I contributed $1,000 monthly to household expenses, but my sister never contributed a cent. Of course, even after joining our company, she didn't contribute financially to the household. I, who had been helping out at home since childhood because of our busy mother, naturally took care of the house chores, while my sister did nothing. "Sis, isn't dinner ready yet?" When I worked overtime, my sister would call, pressuring me for dinner. "I'm at work. Can't you just make something for yourself?" When I asked her this, she replied, "What should I make? The kitchen is your domain, right? I don't want to be scolded for using it without permission. Remember when you got mad at me before?" She constantly brought up past incidents as excuses, refusing to cook. My sister typically doesn't clean up after herself or put things back in their places. She still holds a grudge over the time I scolded her for this. Or perhaps she just uses that as a shield to do nothing. Often I had no choice but to go home, prepare dinner, and then return to the office for overtime. Even my mother rarely cooked dinner and often ate whatever she wanted. However, recently, as Catherine increasingly went to entertain clients, I didn't have to prepare dinner as much, but the entertainment expenses were becoming a headache. This year, my mother turned 63 and she started to complain more about various body aches and the effects of drinking too much. It was during this period that I was summoned to the president's office and told, "I'm handing the company over to Catherine. As for you, the unattractive one, you're fired." It made sense for my mother to hand over the company to Catherine given her past actions. Come to think of it, Catherine was 32, the same age my mother was when she became president. My mother probably believed Catherine could use her beauty in the same way to secure business deals. However, being fired due to my appearance was unacceptable. Even if my salary was diverted to Catherine, it seemed to offer little benefit. When I confided in my aunt, it appears that the news of Catherine becoming president had already spread among the employees. However, the news of my dismissal was a surprise even to my aunt. After some thought, she said, "I do not really understand why either. Apparently, Catherine has been saying behind your back that she dislikes how you are always offering to do things at the company and telling everyone that they can rely on you. Could that be one of the reasons?" Well,
The reality is that whenever anyone relied on Catherine, she only did sloppy work, so eventually no one asked her for help. True, Catherine was inefficient in her work. She frequently missed deadlines, made mistakes over the phone, and had many typos. Despite having some experience in the corporate world, she seemed unaware of her incompetence, perhaps because she was always cuddled and had men hover for her due to her beauty. She showed no signs of reflection. My aunt, understanding this, said, "Well, you're right, but I think she sees you as an obstacle." She continued, "I can't believe they would fire you. The company wouldn't run without you." But she inherently couldn't oppose my mother. She didn't protest on my behalf. I felt disgusted to think that I'm related to those two who treat people like objects and this oddly unreliable aunt. Well, I guess that means both my mother and sister hate me. Well, your sister is indeed terrible. But maybe it's better for you to find a job elsewhere. It's a waste, since you're so capable." There was a faint, familiar warmth in her eyes, as I stood in the reddish hue of the summer dusk inside the company. I gazed distantly at a mirage and felt liberated. "You're right." This was the first time I had felt so refreshed and happy since joining the company. My aunt, slightly perplexed by my sudden cheerfulness, returned my smile with a melancholic one of her own. Time flew, and before I knew it, the end of the month, my resignation date, had arrived. I went to the president's office on time, only to hear my mother and sister chatting happily, obvious to my presence. "That salesman definitely has a thing for you." "Ew, I'm not into bald guys, though." I cleared my throat to get their attention, and only then did they turn to look at me. "What's up? If it's about dinner tonight, we don't need it." "Today is my last day. Thank you for everything." "Oh, it's today. I totally forgot." The thought of never having to see their faces again felt liberating. "I'll also be moving out of the house. Thank you." "That's great." As I closed the door emotionlessly, I heard my sister's voice from inside saying, "Now we don't have to see that gloomy face anymore." I bowed to myself to show them and left the company I had served for so long. A week later, after completing some paperwork, I checked my phone and noticed multiple missed calls from my mother. Shockingly, there were 14 missed calls in just 2 hours. Without returning the call, and with a bad feeling, I kept my phone on silent. By the next morning, the total missed call from her had reached 80, with the last one coming past 2 a.m. I didn't even consider calling her back. For 35 years, I had been controlled by her. I avoided her calls with all my might. I could have blocked her, but kept the calls coming in case I needed evidence of her obsessive behavior. For a while, nearly 100 missed calls came daily. At first, seeing the missed call was distressing, but over time, every missed call made me imagine my distressed mother, bringing me satisfaction. After a year, calls from her ceased. Over that year, I worked part-time while attending a correspondence school for tax accountants. I passed the exams and secured a job at a major tax accounting firm, thanks to the experience gained from working at my mother's company. I was immediately valued in the new company. The 10 years of hard work had paid off, and I felt grateful. My new colleagues were all wonderful, and we worked together harmlessly. One day, while visiting a client near my mother's company, I noticed the office looked unkept with dusty windows and dead plants.
On my way back, I unexpectedly ran into my mother leaving the company. Ah! Spotted me, she approached and instinctively expecting blame. I shielded my face with my bag. Where have you been, Emily? I suddenly felt sick and unconsciously drank back. I called you several times. Did you change your phone? It seems that in my mother's mind, every mistreat she and my sister did to me never happened. After doing so much to me, I couldn't help but wonder how she could think this way. Oh, but I'm glad I was able to catch you. Look at our company. It's in such a terrible state, isn't it? I need you back in the office tomorrow. Don't worry, I'm not mad at you. Excuse me? I said I'll forgive you for leaving a year ago. Just come back to the office tomorrow. It took me a few seconds to comprehend what my mother was saying. Perhaps in her mind, she only sees the younger me, who would cry and long for her. Mom, I'm working at another company now, and I'm happy there. As I hesitated, my mother suddenly turned furious and shouted, What? Even though our company is struggling? I don't care about other companies. You belong to me. Wait a minute. Weren't you the one who suddenly fired me? What about Catherine? What happened to her? Honestly, I thought Catherine would be more useful. She ended up having an affair with 3 different clients and it got exposed. Our deals with them were instantly off. She should have been more discreet. So I kept her away from public view and had her do office work. But she's useless, neither cleaning nor handling the accounts properly. Because of her, we can't even afford to hire anyone else. After ranting for a while, my mother turned to me with a smile. That's why it's your turn now, Emily. Our office has been in chaos since you left. I'd like you to take responsibility. I had properly prepared a handover manual before I left and had explained everything to Catherine. But I guess Catherine never took that, and my mother probably never listened or pretended to forget. This was not my responsibility anymore. They always do this, blame others and make them clean up their mess. I bit my lower lip, recalling the kind faces of the people I work with now, reminding myself that their world is the normal one, and I was stuck in a bizarre one. I vowed not to be pressured by this anymore. It was you, the company president, who fired me, right? My changed tone seemed to startle my mother for a moment. You fired me because I was ugly. Remember you said that? That's what you said, wasn't it? Before I realized it, a crowd had gathered, perhaps curious about our argument. Did I say that? Are you sure you didn't mishear? No, I heard it clearly. You'd hand over the company to my beautiful younger sister, and fire me, the ugly older sister. I didn't understand that time. I worked my bones out for the company for 10 years, and after only 2 years, you suddenly decided to hand the company to Catherine, who barely worked. I questioned your judgment. As I clearly laid out the situation, the crowd began to murmur. Some of the onlookers said, Really? Is that true? Is she seriously your mother? I can't believe you two are related. Some people started recording videos, but my mind was too consumed to notice. My face must have been flushed. My mother's face turned pale under the critical glances showered on her from all sides, and she began to sweat profusely. Emily, there's been a misunderstanding. Let's go inside for now. Misunderstanding? What are you talking about? If you didn't say those things,
Then state clearly here that you didn't, right?" As my mother stayed silent, the surrounding people began to murmur, "Oh, she's silent. So it's true and unbelievable." Suddenly it seemed a switch flipped inside my mother. She shouted, "Shut up! It's all because you are so ugly and gloomy. Ugly people should know their place and listen obediently to beautiful people. That's the only thing they're good for anyway." People were so shocked by her words that they immediately began uploading the videos. The video's thumbnail caption read something like, "Old lady says ugly people should obey the beautiful." This video spread to my mother's business contacts, and in no time, every company started terminating their dealings with her. It seems that during the year after I left the company, my mother had been involved in various shady activities, like illegal dumping and falsifying financial records. As the video spread, everyone seemed eager to cut ties with her. Naturally, the company went bankrupt. My mother and sister, having lost their source of income, once visited my apartment. But, of course, I didn't open the door. Eventually, the two of them moved to an old 45-year-old apartment with no bath, living in fear of debt collectors and surviving on part-time jobs. Catherine tried to find a man who could support her financially, but she would fail and end up being so disliked by her colleagues she had to switch jobs frequently. As for my mother, the uploaded video went viral, so her co-workers kept their distance. She silently walked alone. As for me, I found a boyfriend at my new workplace. He may not be handsome, but he's very sincere, and he said he loves me for my diligent work ethic. We are planning to get married soon. I genuinely feel thankful for having lived honestly, enjoying my days now.
Tom insults me with a disgusted look. You know, people like you are called parasites. Since we are going to live together from now on, please leave. Parasite. Good for nothing. I've had enough of the disdain from my brother, his wife, and my mother. I'm not a saint either. There is no need to be kind to people like them. Let them regret the way they treated me. I decided to bring them down to hell. My name is Emily, a 37-year-old office worker. I live with my mother. 3 years ago, when my father passed away from cancer, he asked me to take care of my mother, so I returned home. I've been living with her for 3 years, mainly due to the promise I made to my father. My mother never appreciates me. Instead, she demands things as if it's her right. I'm going to lunch with friends. Give me some money. I need to buy a birthday present for someone. Give me money. This vacuum cleaner is old. Buy a new one. She constantly relies on me, and it's really troublesome. If I decline, she becomes infuriated with a terrifying expression. When she's in one of her hysterical moods, it's really draining. To avoid conflict, I've decided to give in to most of her demands. I set up a family credit card to avoid the hassle. I made sure to link it to a separate bank account. Fortunately, being a single office worker at my age, I earn a good salary. Additionally, I have been investing in stocks and other investments since my early years, so I have a significant amount of savings and other assets. I never told her about my finances, fearing she'd take advantage. My monthly expenses, including those of my mother, were about $2,684, mostly spent by her. It may seem wasteful, but I'm not strong enough to cut her off. I respect my father greatly, His diligent, kind, and upright character was something I looked up to. It was also from my father's teachings that I started investing early on. I started saving early and began investing once I had a decent amount. With my father's guidance, I was able to progress smoothly in my investments. I would often consult my father whenever I faced difficulties. When I first started working, I used to go out for drinks after work with my father. We would avoid discussing work at home due to my mother's temperament. Thanks to his advice, I began to excel in my job and developed a passion for it. As a result, I'm still single and dedicated to my work. I managed both my work and household chores, as my mother would push even the housework onto me. Over time, I got used to it and became more efficient, especially in cooking. It felt like I had inadvertently trained to become a bride. It would be nice to show that off if someone ever wanted to marry me. Anyway, setting aside those uncertain future stories, I lived a life bound by my mother. I thought I'd have to break away from such a life eventually. Amidst that, another troubling aspect was added to my life. It was the presence of my brother and his wife. My brother, who is 2 years older than me, Tom, and Catherine, his wife, who is the same age as me, started visiting our family home frequently. It's fine for family members to visit the family home, but Tom and I never really got along. We had contrasting personalities and often clashed. I was pragmatic like my father, while Tom was the kind who would spend all his salary and buy anything. Even as a child, he spent his allowance immediately without any planning, thinking as long as he was enjoying the moment, it was okay. And the cunning part about Tom was that he always had our mother on his side. Tom was good at getting spoiled and would beg Mother whenever he ran out of pocket money. "Mother, there's something I want. I'd be happy if you bought it for me. I'll help with the housework. Thank you for always working hard for us." Tom would always flatter and praise Mother like that, and she would end up buying him anything he wanted. Additionally, Tom was good at sports and was quite active in his club activities. He played soccer and seemed to be skilled enough to be selected for special teams. Such noticeable achievements were often the topic of conversation, and he received a lot of praise from our neighbors. To our mother, Tom was a son she could brag about, and she felt as if she was being praised just by being with him. Naturally, she would end up spoiling him even more. While I was academically strong, I didn't excel in anything else, so there weren't any obvious points of praise for me. Visually, I looked average, and I believe many neighbors recognized me more as Tom's sister. Thus, my mother seemed to adore Tom and looked indifferent towards me. I think she didn't like that I was close to our father. And since Tom and I didn't get along, Mother naturally took Tom's side. My father tried to treat both Tom and me equally, but Mother always favored Tom. As a result, Tom became even more arrogant and started treating me poorly. "Hey, move. You're in the way." "No, I'm watching TV right now. The anime I want to watch is about to start. So, move off the sofa." "What? But you've recorded that anime, haven't you?" "I want to watch it in real time. Just move." Tom has tried to push his selfishness
like that. And since mother sided with Tom, whenever Tom and I argued, she would always back him up. Emily, give it to Tom already. Tom's show is a better start. But I'm also watching my show. Don't be so selfish. Just let him watch. Go back to your room. Mother would scold me like that. As I got up, Tom would smugly sit on the sofa. Mother would then bring snacks and juice for Tom. She never gave any to me, always treating Tom specially. When my father wasn't around, Mother really favored Tom and treated me negligently. Having grown up in such an environment, I naturally distanced myself from Tom as we became adults. I still remember the first time I met Tom's wife, Catherine. So you must be Emily, huh? Just as Tom described, you're plain and tacky. What? Catherine said this to me at the formal meeting between our two families. Even though her parents reprimanded her for it, she was laughing about it with Tom. In that instant, I instantly disliked her. Every time we met during Christmas or summer holiday, she would insult me. You're the same age as me and still not married? Or maybe you've never had a boyfriend. Catherine always mocked me like this. Tom would join in, making fun of me too. No man would ever date someone like you. You're good for nothing. They would insult me, especially when our father wasn't around. My mother, of course, would always side with Tom and just laugh along. She never defended me. This made me feel awful every time our family gathered at our parents' home. For several years, due to Tom's job transfer, they weren't able to join family gatherings, so things were peaceful. However, recently Tom was transferred back here and started visiting often, regardless of whether it is the Christmas or summer holiday. They came nearly every weekend, which I found quite bothersome. Even after several years, their attitude towards me hadn't changed, and it seemed their snide remarks had only increased. Wow, you still had that place. Wait, are you still living at home? There she is, the old lady in a kid's room. It's embarrassing to have a family like that. It really is so embarrassing. Tom and Catherine made these remarks, unaware that I was supporting my mother's livelihood. Engaging with them was mentally draining, so I kept my distance whenever they were around. They also seemed uninterested in spending time with me and often went out to eat with my mother. I'd quickly make and eat my dinner and return to my room during their outings. This way, I mostly avoided interacting with them and could focus on my own tasks. I continued this way for a while, but their visits grew more frequent. My mother always treated them to meals, and I was shocked to see the credit card bills from expensive sushi and barbecue restaurants. She also bought them expensive gifts. Most of the branded items they wore were gifts from my mother. I couldn't accept a situation where my mother always paid and they just took everything for granted. So I once confronted my mother. Mom, you spoil Tom and Catherine way too much. And paying for every meal out too. Tom works. He should at least contribute sometimes. When I said this, my mother's face turned bright red in anger. Who do you think you are, telling me what to do? How I spend my money on Tom and Catherine is my business. I let you live in this house, and you dare complain? You ungrateful child." My mother raised her voice like this. She felt like she was doing me a favor by letting me stay. That's what it seemed like to my mother. I was shocked to learn that I was perceived that way. How much have I done for my mother? The reason I live in my parents' house is to keep my promise to my father. Yet she fully relies on my earnings. How could she say such things? It seems my mother also told Tom and Catherine about our recent argument. Upon hearing this, one day Tom and Catherine came over and said the following: "You need to get your act together. You're living in this house because of our mother's kindness, yet you defy her? People like you are called parasites. You should leave." What? Didn't you hear? We're going to live here now, so please leave. Parasite. Good for nothing. Tom, Catherine, and mother were hurling insults at me with contemptuous pieces. That's enough. I'm not a saint. There's no need to be kind to such people. They'll regret mistreating me. And I decided to send Tom, Catherine, and mother to hell. I get it. I'll leave. As I said that, Tom and Catherine grinned. "Remember our promise? If you're still here when we come next time, we won't hesitate to kick you out." Finally, we can live in this house. Mother-in-law, we look forward to living with you. Yes, I'm looking forward to living with you, Tom and Catherine. The three of them seemed excited. I quietly went to my room and started looking for a new place to move. I'm not too particular about the size of the room, so I chose a reasonably priced apartment near my office. It has an automatic lock and is near a supermarket, so it should be safe. I quickly arranged for a moving company. When I informed my mother about the moving date, she immediately contacted Tom and Catherine. A week later, I had completed my move. Mother seemed to dislike being with me, so she went on a trip with Tom and Catherine. Upon their return, they also moved their belongings into our family home. As expected, my mother called me soon. "Wait, why are all the furniture and appliances gone?" "Well, I bought them with my money, so it's natural for me to take them." "Stop kidding. They were all bought by me." "The furniture and appliances are all things you begged me to buy." "So they're mine. Actually, all the money you've been using comes from me." "What are you talking about? I've been paying with my own credit card." "Stop making things up." It seems Mother forgot that the card she's been using is the family card I gave her. She really only remembers what's convenient for her. Well, that's fine by me. I casually responded and hung up the phone. She eventually got angry and said she'd just buy new stuff. But now she can't buy anything anymore. It's because when she used her card, I reduced the balance of my account to 0. And a few days after that, I got a call from Tom. "Hey, what the hell is going on? Why can't Mom's credit card be used anymore? You did this, right?" Tom gets angry in this way. Surprisingly, his intuition seems to be sharp. Saying it's my joy is a strange way to put it, but I just did what's natural. I used to support Mom's livelihood, but since I was kicked out of the house, there's no need for that anymore, right? That's why I zeroed out the balance of the credit card account Mom uses. I'm just trying to make sure she doesn't get wasted before I cancel the card." "Wait, so you were actually the one funding everything?" "Yes, that's right. The sushi and the grilled meat you and Catherine enjoyed, the brand name clothes and bags you wore with pride, Everything you mocked was bought with my money. Is that true? So all this time we were living off you? Exactly. How does it feel, realizing that the sister you constantly looked down upon and berated was the one providing your lavish lifestyle? I bet it feels humiliating for someone with as much pride as you guys. But you're working too, Tom, so it should be no big deal, right? I deliberately provoked him with that statement. I could tell that Tom was frustrated and at a loss for words. Damn, why you of all people? It seems like someone else was listening on the call via speakerphone. I could hear Catherine interrogating my mother. Mother-in-law, why didn't you tell us? Wait, doesn't this mean you don't have any money at all? Mother seemed flustered and overwhelmed by the accusations. I I'm sorry, I just assumed there was a lot of inheritance from your father. It's true that my father left some inheritance, but due to mother's excessive spending habits, not much of his wealth remained. That's why he had always advised me to accumulate as many assets as I could. Well, figure it out yourselves. I just left as you told me to, and I'm cutting ties completely with both Mom and you guys. Goodbye. Hey, wait, the conversation isn't. Saying that, I hung up the phone and blocked his calls. Later on, I received messages from my mother and Tom asking for help, and a new fact came to light. It seems Tom thought he could live leisurely forever if he lived with our mother, so he had quit his job. It's not surprising that he would think we had a significant amount of assets given how lavishly we lived. Currently, Tom and Catherine are hastily working part-time jobs and they finally managed to buy some household appliances. But the luxurious lifestyle is gone, and the trio, Tom, Catherine, and Mother, constantly fight. Every time I receive emails from either side asking to live with me. However, I have already cut ties with them and ignored all their emails. Living alone now, I feel very comfortable, and there's no need for me to get involved with Tom or Mother anymore. I believe I've already fulfilled my promise with my father. From now on, I intend to work hard in my job and investments, continuing to increase my assets. And gradually, I think I'll start focusing on romance and marriage as well.